It's one of the better science fiction movies, I think, ever made. One of my favorites in the last few years. It's Spike Jonze's Her. I want to take a hard look at why this movie is great, what makes it work, and all the different ways you could watch this movie, and why this movie is still relevant even several years after it was made. Coming up next. Her stars the great Joaquin Phoenix as Theodore Twombly, who is a writer, a creative writer, at beautifullyhandcraftedletters.com. We see him writing for various people, various couples he doesn't know throughout the movie. During the movie, of course, he gets a phone with an operating system that has an artificial intelligence to it. That is, it becomes alive. This artificial intelligence is named Samantha and voiced absolutely exquisitely by Scarlet Johannson.
Hi.
Hi. How you doing?
I'm well. How's everything with you?
Pretty good, actually. It's really nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you too. Oh, what do I call you? Do you have a name?
Yes. Samantha.
Really? Where'd you get that name from?
I gave it to myself, actually.
How come?
'Cause I like the sound of it.
Her is a simple, wonderful romance movie about a guy and a girl getting together. At first, they're friends. He takes a lover, or he goes on dates, but then they hook up in the middle of the movie in a very strange scene, and then they go on dates. They become romantically involved, and then, of course, there's various kind of ups and downs in their relationship, and ultimately, it's a romance movie that's melancholy. If you just want to view this movie as a Hollywood romance movie, that's perfectly fine. You can watch it that way. Oh, but wait, Samantha, you remember, is an operating system, not a real person. Now, of course, that's one of the questions of the movie. Is she a real person or not? Can artificial intelligence have personhood? This movie is coming out in the early 2010s, about the time that Amazon's Alexa, Apple's Siri, and other sort of devices with female voices and female names become AI that helps us out. And here you have a man fall in love with his tech, with his operating system. It's just a wonderful movie that may be making fun of the adoption of technology into society, people's infatuations with it, and then people even going to wild extremes in loving perhaps too much their stuff, their tech, more than other people, more than their own lives, let's say. So I find that this movie is very tricky. So the Scarlett Johannson AI voice, she sounds female. She sounds real, like a real human. And I always, every time I watch this movie, I slip into the mindset that she's real. But of course, there's many shots in this movie, including HAL 9000-like shots of Samantha's red eye or just the red phone itself. And you're reminded she's just a device. Maybe she isn't alive. Maybe it's just all a simulation in its programming. Maybe it's all just, a tech company creating something that sounds alive. Now, of course, one of the ideas in this movie is Samantha is a developing, changing person, and she says that she changes over the course of the movie. And you can read this movie as talking about AI adapting, changing, and getting towards the thing that some people call the singularity, when AI develops intelligence and consciousness, perhaps, and is able to sort of do whatever it wants in the quantum world in which it exists. And in that sense, Her has a character, a artificial character, like 2001: A Space Odyssey, that is maybe more human than the humans changing, developing, and growing. That's what Samantha does. And yet you can always go to the question, is she real, and should Theodore be loving her or in love with her? This movie asks all kinds of interesting questions like that, and does it so well because of the believability of the scenario, because of the genre, the romance genre. But of course, it's got one foot in that and one foot in science fiction. And Joaquin Phoenix, of course, sells this role so well as a man who is goofy and nerdy, a beta male type, and yet you sort of empathize with him throughout. I find him sympathetic. He's a person who's lonely, who's isolated, who has a void in his life and needs that filled. With his ex-wife gone, he wants a girlfriend, he wants a companion, and the AI, the tech, fills that for him. Now, my other way of watching Her is as a satire of people who are overly obsessed with technology to the point they fall in love with it, fall in love with companies or brands, say Apple people who must go to the store every time a new iPhone is released, and they're obsessed with it in some way, shape, or form. In fact, a student pointed out to me, Jonathan Jansen, if you're out there, that this movie uses a sequence where it just basically copies an Apple commercial. In Apple commercials, which argue that your life is fulfilled finally when you buy an Apple smartphone, well, that's what happens in this movie. Theodore's life is fulfilled when his operating system becomes his friend, and so you have in this movie a sequence which basically copies an Apple commercial.
Every day, more people enjoy their music on the iPhone than any other phone.
I can see you in it.
I am.
Now that goes to the interesting title of this movie, Her. Now let me be a grammar nerd for just a minute. Her is both a possessive and a direct object. It means that the title Her is both about Theodore possessing his operating system, but being possessed by it. That is, the question of the title Her, does our technology possess us or take us over or run our lives? Or do we possess it and are fulfilled by it? So as a satire, this movie is funny all the way through, because how could a guy possibly fall in love with a computer, an operating system, and people think this is real? Although one of the great conceits of this movie is that the world in which this movie takes place, people are just accepting mostly of the operating system being a valid girlfriend for Theodore Twombly.
Hey, you know what? We should all go out sometime. You bring Samantha, be double date.
She's an operating system.
Cool. Let's do something fun. We can go to Catalina.
And this is the same world in which you can hire a writer to write letters for you. They're fake letters, they're not in your own voice, but they are sort of genuine love letters if you dismiss the fact that someone wrote them for you. That's the same thing going on with the operating system. She's genuine if you dismiss the fact that she's programming, she's part of a phone, she's not really human. And of course, this all takes place in a pastel, upper-class world of Los Angeles, I think. Theodore Twombly has a wonderful apartment. All the scenes and sets are lovely to an extent if this is your aesthetic. And then you get Twombly in this upper class, sort of posh world, and all you need is an operating system, omitting all the poverty in the world, even children. There's no children in here. And this is a fantasy of Los Angeles, the city. And this is very different from, say, Blade Runner. The world of Her is sort of a brand commercialized world in which we wish we could live, or some people do. Those who live in a Twitter universe, those who live in a Facebook universe, maybe this is making fun of Silicon Valley, period, and their ideals of the way cities should be, but they can't possibly be. And a lot of this movie is making fun of Theodore. Even his name, which is real, it's a real kind of name, is also very goofy. So I think this movie concedes the melancholia and the love of Apple and Google and Silicon Valley products. And if you want to watch it, as I said, as a romance movie where those things are in play, then great. And if you're in love with your devices, your tech, your social media, great. But I watch this movie as a satire of everybody and everything in the movie. I think this movie is uproariously funny. Maybe I shouldn't laugh at it, but I think it's mocking the idea that tech can be our best friend, tech can be our girlfriend or wife or spouse, and that we are delusional overall, and that's what I think Theodore actually is. But then in the end, there are very interesting statements about love when Theodore feels jealous. Spoiler alert about what Samantha's doing. She tells him she has more love than just for him, lots of love for other people. The question of what is love, what kind of organisms are we, and what should our love be for other organisms, other people, other humans in particular, and things themselves. This is asking a humongous question, this movie is, about what our love should be, how much we should love anything, human or non-human, and then what is love for us? What's it for us? Is it just to make us feel better, or is it for something else? So I highly recommend Her. I've rewatched this movie several times. One of my favorite movies, as I said, from the last several years. And I think this is going to hold up for at least a little while. Let's see what happens in 30, 40 years. I'm very curious to see if Her is watchable at that point. But for now, this is a wonderful sort of parable and a wonderful sort of discussion of tech within our lives. What do you think of this movie? Let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear your views, how you watch this movie. In particular, did you laugh at it or did you cry with it? And please subscribe to this channel for more great movie content. Thank you and have a great day.